My name is Ashley, and this is Let's Talk Dispatch.
I do. You're gonna do it. Do it really well.
And I believe the world needs more dispatchers.
Around in the mud, blood, and beer.
Years that I'm not working 4th of July. 4th of July.
Saying community policing, right? What about community dispatching?
So on this show, with the help of my guests, we will educate, empower, and support the heroes behind the headset.
Right.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode here on Let's Talk Dispatch with me, Ashley, the Raspy Dispatcher. Hope your weeks are going well. It's been a busy time for us here at the Raspy Dispatcher. On the socials, on TikTok. If you don't follow us on TikTok, do so ASAP. We've been getting a much bigger following on there. I've been going live quite a bit on there, which, let me tell you, is a heck of an experience for someone who is not well versed in the TikTok live world. But what is so fun about it, and I do go live on Instagram as well, but what's so fun about going live in general, no matter what platform we go live on, is just this ability to interact with you folks, like live and in person, answer questions, and then seeing you folks in the chat answering each other's questions. Because what's wonderful about the community that we're creating here at the Raspy Dispatcher with Let's Talk Dispatch is that you folks get to connect with each other. I love being someone that everyone comes to ask questions of, but I don't have all the answers. So creating this space, allowing you folks to connect with each other, is just so impactful. It's so empowering, and it really is so fun to watch. So if you don't follow us on social media, we're on the TikTok, we're on Instagram, we're on Facebook. All of our resources are available at the raspydispatcher.com. So head on over to there and check it out and get involved with us on social media as well, because it is just a wonderful place to connect, not only with me, but with other 911 dispatchers. And speaking of connection, let's connect you with our sponsors. Today's episode of Let's Talk Dispatch is proudly sponsored by Prepared. Their mission is to be public safety's most assistive technology. Revolutionizing how we handle emergencies, Prepared is dedicated to saving more lives and making our communities safer. Learn more about how Prepared is transforming emergency response at prepared911.com. Our next sponsor is Zybex Media. Since 2020, Zybex has been creating impactful recruitment films for their customers. Zybex Media offers their expertise, providing a full range of media solutions designed to attract and retain talent for all PSAPs. Visit zybex.com/media to learn more. These partnerships help us continue to spread the message that the world needs more dispatchers. Interested in partnering with us? Head to theraspydispatcher.com. If you haven't had the opportunity yet, make sure to check out those sponsors. They help make it possible for us to be able to continue to do this and create valuable resources for you all. And they're pretty amazing, I'm not going to lie. So definitely check them out and tell them we sent you. Now, for today's episode, my guest is a Fire EMS Manager at a consolidated dispatch center in northern New Jersey. They have over 14 years of experience in public safety communications, and they started from scratch and have risen through the ranks and want to tell us all about it. My guest today, Matt. Hi, Matt.
Hey, Ashley, how you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Doing well. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for being willing to jump on with us. Okay, I'm not going to lie. Ever since we got on, I've been checking out this chair that you got. Is that like a pillow that you got?
I love this chair. It is a pillow. It's a gaming chair, and I don't use it at all for gaming. It's the best office chair I've ever had.
Oh my gosh, we're going to have to go offline and talk about it, because I need to upgrade my seating in here. So
This is the best chair ever.
Very, very cool. Well, tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into public safety.
Sure. So public safety as a whole it's in my blood. So my grandfather was a police officer. my father has been a firefighter on the volunteer side ever since, before I was born. So I grew up in public safety. Um, when, as soon as I turned 16, I was able to join the volunteer fire department in the next town over from me as a junior firefighter, and I never left. So I started off as a junior firefighter at 16, and here I am, 17 years later, and still a member of the fire service on the volunteer side. And I also started in the dispatch world back in beginning of 2011. So we're coming up right on that 14-year threshold. I started off as a very green dispatcher with zero experience whatsoever, and I just never left there. I came to really love the job, and I rose through all of our ranks, from a trainee to a PST is what we call it here in New Jersey. Then I was promoted to a senior PST, to a supervisor, an operations coordinator, and now as a fire EMS manager for that same agency. So
That's so cool.
It's been a ride.
Yeah, I bet. And I mean, what was it like for you in the beginning? You have all this knowledge about, first responder jobs, and then you kind of fall into dispatch. I mean, was that like complete left field? Did you have a little knowledge about the dispatch aspect of it? Or did you come in here completely blank, even with your previous knowledge of the field?
So I actually got into the dispatch field through one of my friends at the firehouse, where we were working an event, and he just mentioned to me and said, "Hey, I think you'd be a really good dispatcher. You should give it a shot." So I applied to a fire department, career fire department in the town over from me as a dispatcher. They were looking for dispatchers. Unfortunately, I didn't get that job, but that led me to apply to our regional dispatch center for our county, and I was lucky enough to go through that process and be hired, and I started in January. So it definitely, I felt like through the training process, initially it definitely helped a little bit to kind of have a background knowledge of public safety a little bit. It kind of helped me navigate some of those hurdles a little bit more than than I might have been able to if I didn't have that experience. So I was definitely able to capitalize on that fire service experience that I had while I moved through the training process, and that's really followed me all to my current position now as our fire EMS manager, where ultimately I'm responsible for our day-to-day operations for our fire EMS dispatch. I help all of our fire EMS leadership develop their response plans and mutual aid plans, and I act as that single point of contact liaison. We're not like your typical county where we only have one chief, one fire chief and one EMS, one EMS captain. We have 39 towns, and New Jersey is a home rule state. So all these entities have their own leadership. So we have 58 agencies, all in all, that we dispatch for at our regional center, and every one of those agencies has their own leadership. So you can imagine some of the hurdles that inherently come with that, where you're dealing with 58 different personalities.
Yeah, heck yeah. It's one of the crazy things about first responder-esque, no matter fire or law enforcement, is everyone wants to do it their way and have their own slice of the pie. And it presents its own challenges, I'm sure, especially when you're dealing with so many of them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you remember any early calls or first calls for service when you were just getting into this line of work?
I do. So I actually do remember my first call as a new trainee. It was nothing exciting. It was a verbal dispute at a gas station, but that was my first call, and I was absolutely petrified when I answered the call. And the way that we do our training, it's all small group dynamics. So I was in a hiring group of my group was 4 people. So I had my training officer, and then there were 4 of us, and we all listen to each other's calls while we take them. So not only am I nervous, taking my very first call, but I had all those other people listening to me also, because it was a learning experience for them. So yeah, that was my first call, was a verbal dispute at a gas station.
I've never heard of a small group dynamic like my academy mates or cohort listening in on the calls. I think that's a really interesting way of training. I kind of like like the idea. What was that experience like for you? Do you think you would have changed it if you had the power to, or did you really like that way of training?
So I think that it worked out well, and
Mm.
part of the reason why I think it worked was because I got to I got to kind of gain the perspective of my other the other people in my training class,
Mm.
two of which had previous dispatch experience. So, as we were going through, the training process, we were kind of able to, gain a little bit of their experience, and it kind of helped to, you just had somebody else to lean on, and you had study buddies to, to kind of get through and, get through the training regimen. When I
Mhm.
got hired, you had to go through and get your 911 basic telecommunicator certification on your own to even
Mhm.
be eligible for the job. So anybody that was starting with our agency, even though we were completely green, we already had our 911 officer and our EMD for New Jersey.
Mhm.
So we were very green. We had no idea what we were doing, but I had those two people in my training class who, one of them had, God, I want to say he had maybe 5 or 6 years of experience with one of our municipalities,
Mhm.
and there was another woman that had a couple of years of experience also. So it was nice to be able to kind of bounce that. I think that with our agency, we were a little bit unique where when I got hired, we were in the that explosive period for our regional dispatch center where we were rapidly expanding, and it was coming off of this whole push that our governor at the time had for consolidation and shared services. So the big push was save money, and instead of each municipality having to spend, at the time I think it was a $2.5 million upgrade they wanted to the 911 systems. So
Yeah.
instead of every municipality having to go through and spend that, it was just more cost effective to to contract with the county service, the regional
Mhm.
center, and we would just kind of roll these training classes through, and we would run, we still do, we run probably 3 or 4 classes of trainees a year.
Mm. Mm. Very cool. I mean, yeah, consolidate. It's so interesting, like that you bring up, like, we'll pay all this money to upgrade our systems because we're so behind in upgrading our
Yep.
systems across the board, or consolidate and find a new way of doing things, to serve the community. What was consolidation like for you folks? Was it smooth, or was there a lot of pain points in that transfer over, or?
It totally varied. Some of our, when we took on some municipalities, it was super smooth, and there were obviously your learning curves with everything, but some of them were super smooth, and others were totally rocky. One of the one of kind of the pain points that we dealt with was that by going to a regional center, the first responders are losing that relationship. So
Mhm.
most police officers are used to going into headquarters, and they can just talk to their dispatchers, or they'll bring them coffee, bring them dinner. If something happened on a call and they had a question, they would go right to the dispatcher and say, hey, what happened with this?
Oh.
Going to a regional center, you lose that. So
Mhm.
short of the couple police departments that were right around our center, it was very rare that we had that interaction. So you kind of just have that inherent apprehension with
Mhm.
with new faces. It's the public safety curse of, this is how we've always done it, and now you're changing it.
Yeah.
So um, most of them went smooth. For our staff, they we still do, anytime we take on a new agency, we put together a good amount of training materials to try and get our people as familiar with the area as possible, because that's the other thing, is that it's a very, very small percentage of our staff that actually live in within our county and within the towns we dispatch for, just with
Mhm.
cost of living and everything else you have to deal with. So it's not like we grew up in that town and we know exactly where Bob's Corner is if somebody calls and says that there's a crash there. So it's a little bit of a training curve, a little bit of a learning curve, but we got through it.
Yeah, and that is a reality between, and for folks who are, listening, who are figuring out where they wanna work, what they wanna do, um, a city versus, like, a county or a regional situation. I work for a city, I dispatch for my city, that's it, but I transfer to the sheriff's department, and the sheriff's department is dispatching for, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 cities who are, coming to them for services for dispatch. So
Yeah.
there is a level of, man, this is a lot more, especially geographical, information that you have to obtain and know well enough to be able to, effectively serve the communities.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely no, thank you. Like, like one city's enough for me. Well, you've climbed through the ranks over 14 years in public safety. What were some of the biggest moments or challenges that's kind of helped shape this experience from you? There's definitely a difference between frontline and management. And I feel like that's typically a challenge for anybody to make that transition. What was that like for you?
So as I rose up, I definitely made mistakes. I definitely, hindsight being 2020, there's definitely things that, that I would have 100% done differently. But at the same time, I think that, making those mistakes helped create, kind of the manager that I am now. So I don't tell many people. I brought up in one of our training seminars a couple of years ago, but I don't mention to many people that, in my first week and a half of being a dispatcher, being a brand new trainee, I almost quit. And it was just so overwhelming to me, the amount of information that, that was coming in, and just the environment, and the fluorescent lights were just killing me every single day. But it was just, that huge influx. Like, I would go home every day with headaches, and I'm like, I don't know if I can do this. It's like, how do I do a 12-hour shift where it's like my mind is about to explode? I've only been doing this for a week. So I was fortunate. I had a really good training officer at the time, and a group of trainers that helped kind of mold me into being the initial dispatcher that I was. I'm still very good friends with one of them. He was actually in my wedding. But definitely some lessons learned, and I've taken kind of my own struggles that I experienced as a trainee, and I applied that when I became a member of our training division as a CTO. I stayed there for probably 7.5, 8 years. And I was able to build on my past experiences to kind of empathize a little bit with what the brand new hires are going through, and and kind of help them overcome the hurdles, and be like, hey, I was in your shoes. I know exactly what you're feeling. Here are some tips and tricks. This is how I got through it, or this is how I studied to make sure that I retained all of this, because it's a huge amount of just policy and procedure, and the constant I don't want to mess up, because somebody's life is literally in the balance when you're taking these calls. So as I rose up, one of the challenges that I really experienced when I was going from a dispatcher into a supervisory role was you had to flip that spotlight. So, as a dispatcher, like, you want to be in the spotlight. Dispatchers get little to no recognition. It's unfortunate, unless they mess up, and then, they're the first ones to get blamed. But, when you transition into a supervisory role, one of your biggest jobs is to turn that spotlight around and take it off of you, and now put it on your people. And, not only make sure that, you're setting them up for success, but that you're supporting them, and you're giving them every possible tool they need to succeed. Now, when as I entered into the supervisory realm, and I rose up to being our operations coordinator, and now into a manager, as an operations coordinator, my day-to-day responsibilities were basically the general oversight of our comms floor. So anything that happened, I was ultimately responsible for. I was responsible for the shift that we had. Our minimums at the time were 13 people, so I had 13 people under my span of control. And one of the biggest mistakes that I would make as an operations coordinator is that even if somebody at my own level, if somebody was better at a specific thing than I was, I would almost feel like apprehension toward it, and I would be threatened. When in fact, one of the biggest growth mindsets that I kind of learned to embrace was that looking at my peers and looking at my subordinates, if I had somebody on my team that was better at something than I was, then instead of being threatened by it, I needed to embrace that, let them succeed, and give them every tool possible to be as best as they can. Ultimately, by them being great at their job, it makes me great at mine, because I have the successful team, and I'm supportive of them. In turn, they're supportive of me. They know that I'm not I don't feel threatened by their success or their strengths. My weaknesses can be filled by their strengths, and that goes, at the same level, dispatcher to dispatcher as you rise through the ranks. That's one of the things that, I really had to overcome that personally. And now that I've done that, I feel like some of my relationships have really gotten stronger with some of my, with some of my other staff members and some of my other leaders, where, it's kind of a mutual exchange where, I'm not threatened by them, they're not threatened by me, and together we just become a stronger unit. And that's how ultimately you create that positive change. That's how you have the growth mindset, where you don't have that constant threat of don't go to so and so because they might shut you down, or they're apprehensive or they're mean. So that was the biggest thing that I had to learn from myself. And it's still a work in progress. I'm by no means have I perfected that yet, but that's one of the biggest switches that I had to turn getting into that management role.
But it's such a valid lesson to learn, because I feel like when we get put in leadership roles, the perception is like this person's supposed to know everything, and when we don't know everything, that it can be felt as a weakness or a negative thing. But the reality is, it's not our supervisor's job to necessarily know everything. It's just their job to be able to say, I don't know that, and to go figure it out.
Yeah, it makes you human.
Yeah, it makes you human. But what I think the worst thing that really anybody can do, no matter what level or position you are in your life, is lie about our knowledge, right? And then I find out you lied to me, and it's just like this really weird dynamic of like, why are we even lying about this?
Yep.
It's okay that we don't know this, and to be human and recognize it. And like you said, lean on your people when it's their strengths, because it gives them an opportunity to develop in a professional role.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
Do you think that that you received enough training, like as you promoted through these roles, or looking back, do you think it would have been helpful to have more training leading into these positions?
So I was pretty fortunate where, as I was rising through the ranks, we started to implement kind of like a career progression training. So, as our supervisory staff became, supervising PSTs, they all went to the NINA CMCP class. So that, it was way, my personal opinion, that class is way above, what a supervisor needs to know. But they were trying, the agency was trying to give us knowledge. And, so I think that, don't hate them for trying. I think that it was a good gesture. And since then, we've kind of tweaked things where now, the promotional training that we're giving our staff is much more on their level of what they need to know to do the job, and then a little bit more, rather than, hey, here's, an executive director level training, and you're a brand new supervisor, and, you're nervous enough about, needing to know about interpersonal relationships. So, over time, we've kind of perfected that a little bit more, but yeah, we do try and give a little bit of promotional training, but a lot of our stuff is just on the job. And I had some good mentors, from within our own staff that, kind of helped pave the way. And, I think what kind of helped make me a little bit stronger was not just listening to one of my coworkers, but it was, I took a little bit from this one, a little bit from that one, what worked well. Hey, what did this person, maybe get in trouble for in the past that I can kind of learn from, and, make sure that doesn't happen to me. And so it's just kind of like building that, building that puzzle over time of, creating the right fit. I mean, my wife was a huge mentor of mine. My wife is a police officer also. So, taking a lot of her, leadership knowledge and, from her perspective and her side of things, and, kind of transforming that into what I could apply, in the dispatch realm, it was all helpful. So it's all just, taking pieces of other people, and, it's an exchange of information. So, I'm going to give you pieces of me, I'm going to take pieces of you, and we're both going to become stronger because of it. So we can always do more, we can always have better training. It's, I feel like a lot of times that, our training budgets are tight. We fight for training, and I think that it's very important to embrace whatever training we can get. There's no such thing as bad training in my mind. So even if you're going to a training course that might be 2 or 3 levels ahead, you're preparing yourself for the future. So you kind of need to mix and match the the appropriate training for your current job function, and then look for the next level to prepare yourself for that next role also.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I know when I do like sessions at, conferences and whatnot, one thing I usually open with is like, hey, everything in this session might not be for you. Like you might not love everything that I'm presenting here. If you take one thing with you that you bring back to your department and try to implement and try to, work into your systems, that's good enough. Like everything in our trainings, in our sessions, it's not meant to be 100% love everything Ashley's saying or whoever your trainer is saying. It's just meant to give you a place to bounce ideas, learn something new, and maybe take a few things back to the center to implement.
Yeah. If you bring one thing back, it's a successful training day.
Heck yeah. Heck yeah. So what are crisis rehearsal techniques? Can you break those down and how this helps dispatchers?
Yeah. So crisis rehearsal techniques, it's kind of like the dispatch version of doomsday prepping is the kind of the simple way to put it. So picture you're driving in a car, right? And the first time you go someplace new, what do? You plug the place into GPS because you have no idea where you're going. So you plug it into GPS, you follow along with that GPS, and as you continue to go to this place, over and over again, you don't need GPS anymore. It becomes muscle memory. So what crisis rehearsals are is ultimately a mental roadmap. So the body can't do what the mind hasn't done first. So basically in a dispatch environment, that those crisis rehearsals is you're always thinking, when this happens, then I'm going to do this. So, and you can apply that in any situation that you want. So even if it's, the one that I would always do, and people would make fun of me all the time because I would always be like, oh, this guy's going to get in a foot pursuit. So what am I going to do? And, or, this is going to turn into, this active fire alarm is really a structure fire, or this motor vehicle accident is a mass casualty incident. But you're building these mental playbooks so that way, when ultimately that situation does happen, it's not the first time that you're dealing with it. So even though you may not have done it, physically done it, in a real world environment, you've played through these scenarios in your mind where now it's just like hitting the replay button. So it's like, oh, okay, great. I'm not caught by surprise, and I'm not in this freeze of like, what am I supposed to do, and how am I supposed to help this officer? He's calling for help. I've never dealt with this before. So and you can it's not some huge complicated thing. It could even be as simple as when one of your officers goes on a motor vehicle stop, just start getting into that muscle memory of what do you do every single time that that you have a motor vehicle stop. It's one of the most routine things that a dispatcher can do. But it's inherently one of the most complex, and it's one of the most dangerous things that an officer is going to do. So, as soon as I would have somebody go on a traffic stop, the first thing I would do is I would look at my map and I would zoom in on that officer. We have the AVL location mapping for all of our police officers and most of our fire apparatus and ambulances at this point. So, as soon as I would have a unit go on a call, zoom in on it right away, because then it brings you that situational awareness of exactly where they are. And then from there, kind of start thinking, okay, well, if something goes south, what's my next move? My next move is, I'm going to let the sergeant know, or I'm going to make sure that I'm going to make sure that the officer is getting backup. Kind of step back. What's my closest mutual aid? So, who am I going to call based on where they are? You're kind of just, whatever situation you run through, you're building these mental pictures and these mental movies so that when the time comes, you're just hitting play. So, this is and you don't need any special technology to do it. Just let your mind wander, and just, picture the worst thing that could possibly happen. And how am I going to react to that? What's my agency policy on that? Even at that, when you're on midnights, I know we all love Netflix, but when you're on midnights and you have, or even, a weekend shift where it might be a little bit slower, take 10 minutes, when you're doing these crisis roles, you're like, hey, what would I do in this situation? What's the policy say that I have to do? And then what can I do, on top of that to be proactive? If I don't remember what the policy, pull the policy up. Or, if your agency uses guide cards for, call taking or even dispatching, what does a guide card say? Refresh your memory, make these things as second nature as possible so that, in the heat of the moment, you're not like, well, crap, what am I supposed to do? And what does the policy say? Now I'm worried about getting in trouble or, making sure that all my I's are dotted and T's are crossed. The more fluent you can be as a dispatcher, the better off you're going to be for not only yourself, but your agency and for for the responders that you're responsible for. So that's in a nutshell what crisis rehearsals are.
Yeah, and I think it's a great idea because, like you said, you don't need like this extensive like training thing. You just kind of talk it through in your head, and you can actually talk it through with your like partner too, like and just kind of bounce ideas off of how you guys would work together to get through a situation if a situation was to occur. Yeah. Because I had someone on the podcast one time who said we were like the Navy SEALs of law enforcement. We train for the worst thing to happen, but majority of the time we're dealing with routine traffic and things. But when the worst thing happens, we have to be ready to perform like Navy SEALs.
Yeah.
And the frequency of those terrible things happening is so infrequent that sometimes we can get a little complacent, right? In knowing what we need to do.
Yeah, 100%. And and that's one of the hurdles that you have, from a supervisory standpoint is, now not only do you have to make sure that you're ready, but you have to make sure your team is ready. So, how do you evaluate that? And is it, are you doing, just regular kind of team building things? Are you doing tabletops? Like when I was a supervisor, I would have my night shift crew, and we would do 2 hours of professional development every night before we would dive into our personal stuff. So whether it was, iPads or Netflix or whatever that we were allowed to, whatever we were allowed to utilize, before we did that, I had everybody go through and do a little bit of professional development. It's like, hey guys, let's run through this protocol tonight. And let's, hey, we're set up in pods. So, hey, this pod, why don't you guys talk about this call, or this pod simulate a structure fire, and here's the script that you can use, or here's some audio. I'm not going to lie. They absolutely hated it at first, because I was the bad guy, and I had to be like, hey guys, we're not firing on all cylinders. So now I have to be your boss, and I have to, we're going to forego the fun stuff to do some work first. And then, we got to balance it. But over time, like our productivity went up, all of our compliances all went up because we do a pretty comprehensive quality assurance program. All of our measurements went up for our squad because we were doing this stuff. And the more familiar everybody was, the better they performed, and the better level of service we were providing to the public. And it was just, at the end of the day, was it a bumpy road? Yeah, it was a bumpy road, but everybody came out better for it. And that's ultimately, one of the goals that you want to, embrace as a supervisor.
Yeah. I mean, what I look for in my supervisors is that, like, your sole job here is to inform me and protect me, right? So when you inform me on policy, when you create situations where I am being challenged and re-educated on our policies, you're protecting me. And failure to do that is like what our exchange is in the professional world. You're failing at that, right? Like, that is your whole purpose for me as your dispatcher, is to make sure that I have this knowledge and information for when things do happen. So implementing that type of change is tough. So more power to you for, getting through that and getting them to buy in, because that's essentially what you're doing, is you're getting a group of people to buy in. And that's a challenge. But like you said, ultimately it creates a situation where we're educating each other. It creates a situation where we're team bonding a bit. And like you said, the measurements going up, like, it increases our knowledge and our productivity. Yeah. And all of those are good things. How can we argue with them?
Yeah, absolutely.
So speaking of, being the best dispatchers we can be, you also talked a little bit about proactive mindset. what are some simple tips for dispatchers to stay ahead of the game?
Capitalize on your downtime. You know, it's totally it is more than okay to, to kick back and, and enjoy your downtime and, and kind of reset and recalibrate yourself. Even if you take 10 minutes per shift and just, and focus on one thing to either review or one thing to make you better, it's gonna all pay off in the long run. The more proficient you can be with your policies and procedures and, your guide cards and how to be the best version of yourself, that's going to help you in the long run. Trust me. Yeah, trust me. I had that experience, and I think, a lot of it came out of me being part of our training division, where, every 3 months I was forced to basically go through all of our policies and all of our guide cards and prepare and become more familiar. But ultimately, it ended up helping me. I was involved in a call where, ultimately, there was a fatality involved. There was a lawsuit that ensued, and they were coming after me as the dispatcher involved, saying that ultimately it was my fault that this person passed away, and, they were trying to basically prove it. So it went to court, and I was on the stand, and my knowledge and ability to just basically repeat almost verbatim what our policies and procedures are for all of the circumstances that I was presented with, that was a huge factor in why we were found not liable in this case. And, it was from, taking that proactive mindset to just try and make myself the best version that I could possibly be. I don't like to ever consider myself to be mediocre. I always want to look at what's next and, what else can I do? What can I do? What can I be better at? And, for me, and it's going to be different for everybody. For me, that was being, as knowledgeable as I could in every avenue of our operation, of our agency. And so whether it was policies, procedures, how we do call taking, how we dispatch calls, how to navigate the ins and outs of our CAD system and all that stuff. The more proactive you can be, and the more driven you can be to just, always take that one step to make yourself better, it's going to be better for you in the long run. Also, going, from the operational, being proactive from an operational standpoint, if you were on the other side of the radio or the other side of the phone, would you want the bare minimum or would you want the best? So, if I had to call 911 and it was, from one of my family members, the person on the other end of the line, I expect them to be the best and give the best quality of care. So, I would expect nothing less. So, it would be pretty, unfair of me to allow myself to be that, that subpar operator.
I think the highlight on policy, knowing policy because it protects you, is a super important part of our job, right? Like, that is the reason it's there. It's there for a reason, and that is why we follow it. And the example you gave, I think, is one to definitely remind ourselves, because that's like the worst case scenario, right?
Yep.
Is you're there doing your job and you're being questioned on how you're doing your job to the point that it leads to litigation, right? I mean, I think our officers deal with it more often than dispatchers.
Yeah.
But it's a risk, right? It's a reality for us as well. And because we're a little more infrequent in having to deal with that side of things, I think we forget that that is a complete reality when we're answering these calls, and we need to be knowledgeable about our policies. And even when we're having a rough day or we're a little burnt out, that phone rings, you're on that recorded line, you need to perform because of this.
Yeah. I mean, unfortunately, our job, you need to be at 100% of the time. And it's kind of one of the things that makes our job a little bit exciting. It's, one, no two calls are ever the same. Even though, you might get, 100,000 barking dog complaints, they're going to have some variant to every single one of them. But, part of the exciting part is that you never know what it's going to be. you never know what it could be a 911 call. It could be one of the non-emergent, the 10-digit administrative lines that are ringing, and you have no idea what you're about to encounter. It's kind of part of the fun, I guess.
It is definitely one of those things that is very unique to this line of work that I don't think you know till you know, right? Like,
Yeah.
Someone can tell you like through the application process, through the interview, but like until you're in there, like juggling and balancing all the things, you just don't know the reality of it.
Yeah. It takes a very, very special kind of person to do what we do.
Heck yeah. Well, you also started teaching about tactical dispatch team development. Can you tell us a little bit, for folks who aren't aware, what tactical dispatch is, a little bit about what it is, and maybe what are some of the key things that folks should be implementing into their tactical dispatch teams?
Sure. So this all came out of me needing a project. So I was going through my RPL and my public manager certification classes at the same time, and part of both of those courses that you need a service project. So at the time there was just with the world there with world events, it was it was right around the time where it was a lot of civil unrest because of interaction with law enforcement. So there were protests popping up all over the place.
Yeah.
And one of the things that frustrated me as a dispatcher was that our tactical teams would go out and they would be doing these large details, or whether it was the planned protest or even a search warrant or a barricaded person, our tactical teams would all be out in force on whatever incident, and we had no way of knowing who. We didn't know who was there. We didn't know what they were doing. We had no way to communicate with them. Now, these are all, looking back, you look and it's like, how did we let this happen for all the years that we did? And this has been going on long before me. This is just, it was the curse word, right? It's the way that it always was.
Yeah.
So, and I got so aggravated at how it was being handled, and just, the not knowing, because, everybody knows all you needed was that one time where you had an officer key up and was like, officer needs assistance. Well, where are you? Who are you? What are you doing? And we didn't have any of this information at the time. So I needed a project, and this was kind of what I pitched to my director. And I said, hey, what do you think about forming up a specialized crew of dispatchers, not just to handle these types of incidents, but actually put dispatchers out into the field with our tactical teams, or with our with these critical incidents, instead of having to worry about a dispatcher miles away. The dispatcher's right there. And he looked at me and he's like, well, Matt, he goes, you have my support to do your project. Full disclosure, I really don't think it's going to take off. I was like, okay, no problem. Well, worst case scenario, I have my project. So I was able to get a lot of good support from our sheriff's office and our prosecutor's office and our public safety director to build out this team and research how to do it. And so what we've gotten to now is we actually have a team of 10 people who are trained to the just a little bit higher level of dispatch. So we put everybody through the APCO tactical dispatch course. There's a ton of courses out there. NINA has one, APCO has them, FEMA actually has one. We put people through all three of those. And in addition to that, we also put people through SWAT specific training for our county SWAT team. We actually ended up integrating directly in with our SWAT team very heavily, where we're to the point now where anytime they turn a wheel, we're right there with them. Now, no, we're not on an entry team going in to play, but we are ultimately.
Well, that would just be too much fun.
But we are ultimately, we're serving as that command post. And I don't think anybody really, understood what strengths dispatchers truly bring to the table until we were standing shoulder to shoulder, and they got to see us doing our thing. And just the amount of technology and capability that we were able to bring out of the comm center and put it onto an incident scene, it's really proven to be a huge asset to our public safety community. And it's not just for law enforcement. We just actually had an incident a few days ago where we had crews out working a large brush fire, it was a huge mutual aid event, and they were out there for probably 18 or 19 hours all in all. So, but we're bringing the capabilities of our full CAD system, our full phone system, radios. We actually have a drone that we'll bring out and help provide that aerial surveillance on an incident scene. So the tactical dispatch concept is a lot more than what I was initially introduced to it as. So when I was a new dispatcher, we went through a tactical dispatch course, and all it really taught you was how to answer the phone. And I was kind of bummed. I was like, okay. I'm like, well, like you said, it was like a tactical, like what was tactical about this? Like, it was a critical incident call taking class, which was still very, very good. So yeah, I took my professional experience from building out our tactical dispatch team, and now and overseeing that unit now, and I started sharing that knowledge. So it's really not a very widespread thing, and part of the struggle when I was going through our implementation, our development, was that there was no one around that at least I could find. There was nobody that I could research to build something the way that we wanted to do it. So, which is kind of cool, where, I was able to build something that nobody else did, and it's really taken off. So it's, I've seen, we've kind of increased our involvement with these critical incidents. I want to say pushing at least 200%. Over the last year or so. And it's been a really, really good opportunity, not only for myself, but for the team of people that we have, where now all of us have kind of gotten this new sense of purpose. And it gets you out of the quote unquote windowless basement of dispatch, but it's just an entirely different environment that that you get exposed to, and it's an entirely different realm, being out on an incident scene, and and kind of just getting to see that side of things, and being part of that command post operation, and part of the incident planning process, and troubleshooting things on the fly, because inherently things go wrong in public safety, and not everything is a smooth road.
What? Never. Things never go wrong.
Yeah. So I've been very fortunate to be given the opportunity that I had. And now I just started sharing that with with other dispatchers. Now I also take it and kind of get people to understand that just because you're not you might not have a unit that's actually deploying out to an incident scene, you can still employ a lot of the tactical dispatch philosophies just from within your own center. And believe it or not, you're probably employing a lot of these concepts just in your day-to-day operation. You don't even know it. So it's kind of getting people to just expose themselves a little bit and say, hey, you know what, like maybe I am a tactical dispatcher, and and I just never had the formal training, or I don't call myself that. Even just handling a motor vehicle stop, in and of itself, that's the tactical dispatch operation. You're running through databases, you're preparing for the worst. You're doing that, those crisis rehearsals for what happens when this becomes a vehicle pursuit. And that opens up a whole nother slew of complications that as a tactical dispatch you need to be familiar with. A lot of people that I've interacted with here in New Jersey, it was kind of an eye opener when, I would ask them and said, hey, who thinks that, we should know our Attorney General use of force policy as dispatchers? And inherently it's crickets, because the use of force policy is typically a cop thing.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know if it's this way for every other state. I'm sure it's not. But for New Jersey specifically, there's actually a section of our vehicle pursuit policy that talks about the responsibilities of a dispatcher. And if you don't know that, you're never going to know.
Yeah.
But, if nobody ever took the time to say, hey, you should really be familiar with this section of the use of force policy, because it says exactly what you have to do as a dispatcher. And, if the police officer who's involved in the pursuit, if they're not giving this information, you actually have to prompt them for it. And it's kind of getting people to open their eyes and say, oh, you know what, I didn't even think about that. Hey, like maybe it's not a bad thing to go back to your agencies and say, hey, Sarge, hey, LT, like next time you guys do your use of force refresher that you have to do probably every year, like, can we maybe sit in on that? Because maybe we can bring some value, and maybe, while you guys work on building your component of the team, I can help build my component of our team.
Mhm.
And, even just something as simple as, every year police officers are doing active shooter training, right? And, have you ever been involved in an active shooter training event with your officers?
Mhm.
See, and that's a huge problem.
Huge problem.
Yeah, that's a
Huge
huge
problem.
problem. Now,
I mean, they'll let us role play. I'm like, but I'm not going to be a victim in this. I'm
Yeah.
going to be a
but like,
dispatcher.
very few agencies that, at least that I've come to find, very few agencies actually involve their dispatchers. And, ultimately, what are those cops doing? They're doing those crisis rehearsals, right? They're developing the muscle memory, and they're going through and, hey, they're working on team dynamics and, hey, how is Bill going to react during this stressful situation so that I can best back him up? Well, okay, guys, I might be a couple miles away, or I might be at the command post, a block or two away, but, I might bring a lot of value that can help you successfully mitigate this incident. So, let's figure out how I'm going to react during these situations so that, God forbid, when that call happens, it's not the first time that I'm dealing with it. Or, I know how to, I know what information you guys need to go in and do your job to the best of your ability. So, it's part of also bridging that gap and getting people to kind of understand that, dispatch is really part of the team. So, let's try and involve us a little bit more, because ultimately we're just going to make ourselves more effective.
Yeah.
So, like, yeah, it's a tactical dispatch, development class, and, it's more of a critical incident, as a whole, critical incident dispatch, taking it from the practical side of things actually into the tactical side of things. But yeah, a lot of it is just getting that exposure and getting the people to, kind of open their eyes and say, hey, you know what, maybe I can bring this one thing back to our agency and say, hey, do you mind if I sit in on this tabletop? Or, do you mind if I, next time you guys go out and do this active shooter training, can I tag along? If for nothing else, like, hey, I'll be the one to say, to answer the radio so you don't have to do it.
And I think the active shooter training is a big one, right? Because you practice your perimeter, but like, as you're setting up to go in, we're getting hundreds of calls. What is our policy? What are we telling these kids to do? Like, what are we like, what does that look like for us?
Yeah.
What are we telling parents? What is our policy when we're fielding all of these calls while making sure the resources that you need are there for you? Like, that's a huge it's a huge thing that we're not addressing enough in our departments, because it's not an if at this point. It's a win. Percentage wise, statistics wise, it's a win. And we need to be prepared for that.
Yeah, absolutely. So so I started teaching this class. It's called Critical Incident Dispatch from Practical to Tactical. And it just goes through kind of all those, it's all a building block course. So I start with the critical incident call taking, talking about, some of the more critical type calls we might take, whether it's, a domestic violence incident, going up to the current, active assailant situations, and just the dynamic that we're starting to see with a lot of the schools, but the preparation that the school systems are also taking through Alyssa's law. We talk about Alyssa's law, which a lot of dispatchers don't even know that, they don't even know that these systems exist in their own municipalities. So, it's been kind of a good opportunity to just, bring to light a lot of the technology and a lot of the resources that already exist that our dispatchers just might not know about. And these things are probably happening, in their municipalities, and they don't know they exist. If there's this panic button, activation in one of your schools, how is that coming to your dispatch center? Is it coming to your dispatch center? With some of the ways that these states wrote their version of Alyssa's law, technically, if the panic alarm activation gets directed to a sergeant's cell phone, that's technically fulfilling the obligation, and dispatch might not even know about it. Now, what happens if the sergeant's out of the car and he doesn't have his phone? It's kind of one of those hurdles. So there's a lot of technology that's out there that, that we might not just be aware of. And I feel like that as time kind of goes on, the typical dispatch environment is kind of transitioning more toward a real-time crime center.
Yeah.
And you see a lot of the bigger cities now are starting to stand up their own dedicated standalone real-time crime centers, which is fantastic. But absent those state-of-the-art facilities, who's your real-time crime analyst? It's more than likely going to be your dispatchers that are we're the ones that are getting hammered with calls. And we're looking at traffic cams and our license plate reader cameras, and where are our suspects, and where are these calls happening, and kind of not only triaging all that information, but making sure that all of the, for lack of a better term, verbal diarrhea that we're getting, like we have to condense that all down into a 5-second transmission that makes sense.
Yeah.
That accurately depicts the situation to our officers, or to our firefighters, or to our EMTs. And that's a huge hurdle in the job that that we have to overcome.
And it takes repetition, and it takes practice, and it takes doing it over and over and over again to really understand the level of condensing we do in such a quick amount of time. It baffles me, and you're trying to not only to tell them accurately what's happening, but you're also trying to tell an emotion, this is how this person seems, without it being convoluted with their own perceptions, but really trying to paint the picture for these units who are responding so they can accurately prepare to assist this person who needs help.
Yeah, 100%.
Now, is this class something that you offer outside agencies to come out and take with you folks, or is it all really an in-house thing at this point?
No, so the course is available. So I'm happy to travel. Anybody that wants to get a hold of me, if they're interested in bringing it to their agency, probably the best way to get a hold of me is either through my LinkedIn page using my name, or through the Instagram page, Critical Comms Training. Dispatch is all about sharing knowledge. Public safety is all about sharing knowledge. So the more widespread we can get these messages, the better off we're all going to be. So don't hesitate to reach out. And honestly, even if people don't want to host the course, or even just a matter of picking somebody's brain or getting somebody else's perspective or ideas, that's what this is all about. It's all about taking pieces of us, giving it to pieces of all, filling those void spaces in you guys, and then the profession as a whole becomes stronger.
Yeah, that's amazing. And we'll include all the links to connect with you and your training program in the video description, so don't worry about that. It'll be linked and tagged here. But one of the last questions that I ask everyone who comes onto the show is, what advice would you give someone who's considering a career in dispatch?
Don't quit on yourself. And that, that's kind of, going back to my personal experience, is, I feel like if you're even considering going into the dispatch field, you're already that special, you already have that special type of, those special qualities, because the normal person, I don't feel like could be like, oh yeah, I want to go and answer 911 calls and be a dispatcher. So it takes a very, very special kind of person to do it. And even, considering going into that profession, it means that you have those qualities. So, don't quit on yourself, and, always shoot for the stars, and, don't be afraid to ask for help, because, even if it's going through the process, a lot of the interview process with today's climate, I feel like has gotten much more relaxed than what it used to be. So there's no, I felt like, anytime I would interview for a job, they're like, oh, and do you have any questions? I was almost afraid to ask them, because it was like, is this a sign of weakness? That I don't know. I have no idea what I'm getting into. But show the interest. Show the interest. Show them that you actually care. And don't sell yourself short. Don't sell yourself short. And and don't accept the status quo. And and shoot for the stars.
Amazing. Well, Matt, thank you so much for coming onto the show. Such amazing advice, such amazing gems to take away, and really investing in yourself, which is ultimately going to give back to so many different dispatchers, not only at your department, but with this course. And I'm sure the additional courses that you're going to create for us.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for having me.
Awesome. I'll be right back with you, Matt. All right, everybody. That was another amazing episode here on Let's Talk Dispatch. I spent a very short amount of time on our tactical dispatch team at my first agency, and it is definitely a very unique opportunity for dispatchers. But like Matt said, even if you are not on your tactical dispatch team, you are still very much able to utilize and learn tactical dispatch stuff because you are implementing them into our everyday roles and services that we're providing our officers, our units, our callers. So definitely check out Matt, and we'll have all their information in the description of this video so you can check out this training course and hopefully bring it to a center in your area. Until next time, everybody, stay raspy. Thank you for listening to Let's Talk Dispatch podcast. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button. You can find us wherever you listen to podcasts, including Apple Podcasts and Spotify. If you're interested in becoming a guest on the show, or maybe even submitting your own story, you can do all that and more at theraspydispatcher.com. Until next time, stay raspy.